Hi guys, so we're going to continue in that vein. So a little backstory. My mother was under the care of a doctor for years, most of my childhood. We used to sit in the waiting room over there in the West End where I lived, by Evelyn. I forget what street, but all the ladies would sit. It was always crowded. Mr. Pepito, and I'm sure everybody remembers that because he's related to the Landseys. So there's that. So a lot of people are connected. Everybody knows everybody, but of course they want to continue making things up, making false allegations instead of people being able to talk about this stuff. So I don't want to get too far into my anger because this stuff angers me that people aren't getting the treatment they need and they're not getting consideration. And I certainly wasn't listened to at all. They just make up what they want to make up. They protect the people that are actually being abusive, and then they take it out on the victims. And we see this across the board. So again, these are kind of off the cuff. So if I misspeak or, things don't go together exactly right, it's because I kind of have to go with this. I was told I have cue memory. So I kind of, when I start thinking about some of these memories and I've been processing some of it, I kind of put it together real quick to give it to you and put it together so we can talk about it. Because it's difficult to bring up some of this. And I certainly don't think this is the place to do that. I had told the psych ward when they sent me over there, there was broken Christmas lights. I broke a string of Christmas lights after I was roofied. And I told the gentleman, the psychologist, I said, well, bring in my mom. She's struggled with these issues since I was a kid, with this Dr. Pepito telling her she had nerves, which was ridiculous, but that's what it was called back then. She used to just sit crying one minute and then the next minute she was raging, which, again, I'm not a psychologist, but it would seem that that's some sort of, manic depressive kind of thing. And certainly his aunt had manic depressive. That can be verified. And we dealt with her, his Aunt Irene, my ex-husband. So we take care of her for 20 years and then they turn around, they mix up my files and they start accusing me of having some sort of mood disorder. So, and I don't. But this is what these people do to cover things up. And they did it in my case. You're crazy whore, you're delusional. And this was after I reported a sexual assault and the domestic violence. Right away, you're crazy. And this is how my ex-husband started. And that's crazy. His sister-in-law is a special needs teacher. You're crazy. You got all these ACEs. You're welfare. You came from divorce. And I heard this as soon as I got married with my half family, with my mother. I hadn't even seen her. She moved away. And I hadn't seen her till 20 years till she showed up and then started in about this whole thing. You're crazy. So the little backstory was, I grew up going with my mom to see this Dr. Pepito. She was often on meds. They didn't work. She was on the pill. She was continually pregnant. My grandmother was continually beside herself. The violence, the inability to think clearly. She often seemed, drugged, to put it mildly. But I don't want to get into her story and I don't want to do her inventory because you do learn that you shouldn't be taking other people's inventory. But I do have to touch base on it because instead of her getting the help she needed, this has been covered up for a long period of time because she knows sheriffs or she knows these people. It's a small community and a lot of people know each other, and certainly sorority girl, which I've come to call her because it was always not about her. It's always her daughter's on welfare, me, or her daughter's this, or her daughter's that. I mean, she gossips behind my back. She starts trouble with all these people. She didn't want to be my mother. She told me that, when I was a kid and so on and so forth. Again, I don't want to go off on these tangents, but so, we take care of his aunt who have mental health issues. And right away, he's sitting, plotting and scheming that he's going to make this stuff up about me, and which he did. So, he gets together with the police chief and all these other police officers and all these people through his sister-in-law who's special ed. And they start going through my ACEs and all these stereotypes. And they did that as soon as I got married. That this has been going on a long time with this half family of mine, which is full of alcoholism, sexual abuse, inappropriate behavior. So I think it's a good idea to tell my story for a change. And for a long time, I didn't talk. I took the high road. I was often told, it started when I was young with my mother's boyfriend telling me, well, Bonnie's the singer. My dad was in a successful rock band, or a band, was kind of rock, slide guitar rock country. And, you know, I wanted to sing. My dad would pick me up in the air and the audience would be cheering. And I thought, you know, gee, I could, oh no, Bonnie's the singer, his daughter. I wasn't his daughter. I'm not blood. He used to tell me, you know, so I touched base a little bit on that story. I don't want to get too far off into that story, but he was also under the care of the VA. He was a war hero. He had a Purple Heart. He had a lot of medical conditions. He was alcoholic. He was inappropriate, so on and so forth. And my mother would go off work, you know, to the country club, and I was left with this man. So I brought up some things about him. He used to make these beautiful wedding cakes, but you know, he'd start drinking the beers and then start talking about all this other stuff. So, you know, again, he was under the care of the VA. My mother was under the care of this Dr. Pepito, but here we are today, and these people are still twisting things around. And so I thought it's a good idea to start telling my story. And the time goes quick. Here it is. But so I'm going to touch base on some of this stuff. If I struggled with something, I would go get help and, you know, deal with it. You know, I don't think people should be ashamed of this stuff. And certainly I watched my mother over the years deal with some of this stuff, and it was never, and I told the psychologist out there, I said, out in Hutchins, I said, well, bring her in. Let's sit down and have a discussion about what actually went and happened. You know, happened when I was a child. See, they didn't want to do that. See, they want to make up all these false allegations, and this Judge Lorman writes all this stuff down, but yet they don't want to actually talk to the victim. They don't want to actually go through some of the stuff that went on. You know, some of the verifiable stuff. My mother was under the care of Dr. Pepito my entire childhood. Okay? So instead of going through some of this stuff, they allow her to just call in on the phone and say, oh, she's violent, I don't want to talk to her, which is ridiculous. Okay, so we're going to continue to go through some of this stuff, and be safe. I'm a little over, so it's a little hard to parse it all, but we'll get through it. Be safe, guys.